Hey there, YouTube! Wrestling Optimus here, back with another action figure review. Today is going to be a very special review, actually. For those of you who don't know, I've been doing a podcast with some friends over at the Social Suplex Podcast Network. It's tied to a project where a group of wrestling fans compiled a list of the greatest matches of all time. Basically, what happens on our show is the host, Danny, randomly generates 3 to 5 matches from that list. We watch them, and then talk about why they're considered so great and whether or not we agree. Then, unlike in my reviews, we end by giving them star ratings just like Uncle Meltzer. What I personally find most interesting is that Danny and the other guys know a lot more than I do about older American wrestling, as well as Japanese and Mexican wrestling. Conversely, I'm the only one that pays close attention to the modern American product, so I provide that perspective. All in all, it's a really great listen, so if you want to check it out, head on over to the Social Suplex Podcast Network and search for Great Match Generator. That brings us to this action figure review. When I took a look at the list of matches for our latest episode, I realized that by luck of the draw, I had figures for 3 out of 5 of them. So I thought, why not try a little cross-promotion and make a very special review video for today? That's right, bonus content, bitches! I've got 3 WWE Classics, plus 2 vintage offerings from Japan. So let's generate some great matches and take it over to the action figures. Actually, we're going to do this in chronological order, which means both Japanese matches are up first. And unfortunately, I don't have figures for them. That's why I've dug up some pictures of the matches instead, so you can at least get a feel for the atmosphere of old school Japanese pro wrestling. I'm familiar with Giant Baba as the patriarch of All Japan Pro Wrestling, on par with Antonio Inoki over in New Japan. However, I've never heard of the Destroyer before. I also don't know if this is taking place at any specific All Japan event. Seeing as it's in the 60s, long before the advent of pay-per-view, it couldn't have been one of those. Pretty standard stuff here, which makes sense being near the beginning of televised wrestling. Slow, methodical working over of limbs, lots of selling, and great classic heel work by the Destroyer. He really knows how to get heat from a crowd by screwing with the ref and taunting them. This is a very long match, mostly comprised of rest holds locked in for multiple minutes at a time. The crowd loves it though, and revel in the heel's desperate attempts to break free or cheer on the babyface as he fights through the pain. At one point, Baba puts on a modified STF that puts John Cena to shame. At another point, the Destroyer puts some kind of mystery substance on his thumb and jabs it into Baba's eye. The Giant sells it like the finger poke of doom, while the Destroyer wipes it off before the ref can DQ him. Then, he sells to the crowd as if it was a simple palm strike. Not gonna lie, I laughed. The Destroyer's antics remind me a lot of Andy Kaufman. The crowd completely buys into everything he's doing. The payoff comes about 40 minutes in when Giant Baba starts grabbing at the Destroyer's mask. He gets it all the way to where his nose is sticking out of the mouth hole, not only cutting off his breathing, but effectively blinding him. Yet again, the crowd loves it, laughing hysterically at his predicament. The Destroyer retrieves a weapon from his tights and mercilessly beats the Giant in the face until he draws blood. Again, he hides the object before the ref can find it. This only pisses off Baba, who unleashes a fury of offense culminating in a sunset flip for the pin. In my opinion, the Destroyer has a legit argument that he kicked out at 2. Not exactly sure how the referee can justify that count. So the Destroyer and friends argue with the ref, including some guy dressed like a cowboy who raises the Destroyer's hand in victory. Meanwhile, a bunch of young boys in blue tracksuits surround Baba. Just an FYI, this is a 2 out of 3 falls match, and this was the first fall. Eventually, they're able to get the second fall underway. The Destroyer kicks Baba to the ground, then stomps on his leg 3 times before putting him in the figure 4 leg lock. But strangely, the Destroyer starts flailing his arms and seemingly taps out. Giant Baba remains stoic while in the hold, but suddenly the bell rings and streamers start to fly. The Destroyer's posse of cowboys rush the ring. One of them knocks down the ref in the ensuing melee as a guy who looks like Antonio Inoki comes to Baba's aid. Everything is in Japanese, so I don't know exactly what's going on here, but basically, this was called as a 60-minute time limit draw in which Giant Baba won for that first fall. The ref holds up Baba's arm, and he's presented with a massive trophy, despite being on the wrong end of a submission hold. Now we skip forward 20 years and head over to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Just like in the last match, I'm very familiar with Jushin Thunder Liger. He's considered one of the best juniors ever, and has one of the most unique and iconic looks in wrestling history to boot. However, I don't think I've ever heard of Naoki Sano before. From what I'm to understand, these two met again a year later in a much more famous match, and unfortunately, all the pictures I could find were from then. That also made it difficult to find this match, but luckily, Danny has connections. Liger comes out looking like a damn road warrior with football shoulder pads while rocking a gold mask and the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. He actually keeps the pads on during the match, which is bullshit, the same way Roman Reigns wearing that protective vest for years was bullshit. To clarify, the shoulder pads are because Liger had a shoulder injury and felt like being extra about it. That's in fitting with his character, since apparently these two were seen as heartthrobs back in their day, as evidenced by this image. The match itself is fast-paced with tons of high-flying moves you'd expect from the juniors division, which is pretty much the Japanese equivalent of cruiserweights or the X division over an Impact. Towards the end, Sano predictably starts working over Liger's injured arm with a series of arm bars, but it's a superplex off the top rope that finally allows Sano to put away the champ. Since no one hands him the belt, I'm assuming this was a non-title match. I definitely like this more than the other Japanese match, but it's honestly like comparing apples to oranges. Taken in the context of the time, I can see why both are considered great, but I probably wouldn't seek either of them out if it weren't for this podcast. Our first WWE match generated for this review is actually from an episode of Raw on May 21st, 2001. Good old JR and Paul Heyman are on commentary, meaning I can even recreate that with figures. Now, in order to get some context, I went back and watched some earlier segments. Turns out, this was the night after Judgment Day, and only a little more than a month after WrestleMania X7, considered the best WrestleMania of all time. That was also when Stone Cold Steve Austin turned heel and aligned with Mr. McMahon. So by this point, not only was he the WWE Champion, but along with Triple H, he was one half of the Tag Team Champions as well. At the start of Raw, Jericho interrupts Stone Cold to say he doesn't care why Austin turned heel, he just wants a shot at the two-man Power Trips Tag Team titles for himself and Chris Benoit. Skip to just before the match, and the Chris's are talking backstage about how they came up together in Canada while going through the infamous Stu Hart family dungeon, then went through all that crap down south. Subtle. It's interesting seeing Stone Cold as a heel and Jericho as a face. Benoit plays the babyface in peril, getting double-teamed before eventually battling back and sinking in the crippler crossface. However, referee Earl Hebner gets distracted for the first of many times, allowing Triple H to break it up with a chair. They go back to working over Benoit until Hebner misses a tag to Jericho and tells him to get back in his corner. But he attacks Stone Cold instead, distracting Hebner again just as Triple H hits the pedigree and gets the visual pinfall. Jericho finally tags in and goes straight for Stone Cold, catching him in the walls of Jericho. Triple H breaks it up, so they brawl over to the announce desk. Hunter tries to do a pedigree on top, but Jericho reverses it into the walls. Meanwhile, back in the ring, Benoit hits a diving headbutt and goes for the pin, but yet again, Hebner is busy with the other two. Stone Cold hits a stunner, and although Hebner finally goes for the count, Jericho pulls him out. After a bulldog and a lion salt, you guessed it, Earl Hebner takes a ref bump, allowing Triple H to retrieve his trusty sledgehammer. But he accidentally hits Austin in the gut before getting taken out by Benoit. Jericho makes the cover as Hebner does a ridiculously slow count to help crown your new Tag Team Champions, Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho. This had way too much referee usage for my personal tastes. I think that might be a sign of the times, but it definitely took away some of my enjoyment from the match. I did love seeing all these mega stars together in their prime, hitting all their signature moves. Their selling was fantastic, as was the textbook ring psychology. Heels cheated at every turn, used weapons, and isolated the smaller baby faces. Not to mention, this is the match that Triple H tore both of his quads and he still had Jericho put him in the walls. Then there's the crowd, probably one of the hottest TV crowds during a time known for hot TV crowds. They're probably what make this such an iconic match. And to think, they gave this away for free on an episode of Raw. Elimination Chamber 2014. This match was actually handpicked by Danny as our way of honoring the late Jon Huber, aka Luke Harper, after his tragic passing back in December. For reference, the Wyatt family was at their peak in 2014, but since it would be another 2 years before I got back into wrestling, I wanted some background before watching this match. Luckily, they had a great video package beforehand, recapping everything which led up to this epic showdown. Apparently, the Wyatts attacked Roman Reigns during his qualifying match for the titular Elimination Chamber. That didn't sit well with the Shield, who, in subsequent promos, basically said, if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. Now, the only way left to determine who is the most dominant faction is a 6-man tag team match. I think this is the first time I've ever seen the full entrances for both groups, and I gotta say, they are awesome. The Shield comes down through the crowd to a massive pop, with music I associate solely with Roman Reigns to this day. The Wyatts, on the other hand, come out to their eerie music, led by Bray and his lamp, with an entire arena of fireflies lighting up the darkness. Bray takes a quick load off in his rocking chair before ordering the family into the ring. Even before the pandemic era with its empty arenas, I can't recall a reaction like this in a long time. The groups just stare at each other while a divided crowd goes nuts, chanting for the names of both. Finally, after a brief scuffle, things officially get underway. Rowan and Harper work over Seth until the crowd erupts for Bray vs. Roman. They don't do much though. Then we get to see what I was looking forward to the most, Luke Harper vs. Dean Ambrose. Knowing their history from the Indies to AEW made this moment feel extra special, even if they didn't do anything particularly memorable either. Luke Harper does get to show off a little. After getting thrown over the top rope by Seth, he nails one of his signature sidewalk slams. Then he hits Ambrose with a big boot when he tries to break up a pin attempt. But my favorite moment was his suicide dive. I know it's overused, but guys his size shouldn't be able to move like that. After cleaning off the announcer's desk, Dean and Bray fight into the audience, but only Wyatt emerges. Rowan takes out Roman, and suddenly Rollins is left all alone with the entire Wyatt family. Luke and Eric double chokeslam Seth through the Spanish announce table because of course, then turn their attention to Reigns. They beat him down until Bray goes for the Sister Abigail, but Roman manages to power out and reverses it into a Samoan drop. He takes them out one by one before lining up for a spear. Harper sacrifices himself by jumping in front of it, so Wyatt quickly grabs the big dog and delivers a Sister Abigail to pick up the victory. Wow, that was just as good as people say. Every time I thought it was about to get dull, someone would tag in and bring the intensity right back up again. There were so many great pairings throughout this match, from Roman vs. Bray to Ambrose vs. Harper, and the finish put everyone over. Ambrose had to be dragged out into the crowd, Rollins needed to be put through a table, and Reigns needed a 3-on-1 in order for the heels to win. Plus, Bray beat Roman with just one of his finishers, simultaneously putting over and protecting that move. What a match! I'm so glad I watched it. And rest in peace, Brody Lee. Finally, we're going to be taking a look at the 2015 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, specifically the no DQ WWE Championship match between Brock Lesnar, John Cena, and Seth Rollins. I think this is the most recent match we've ever done on Great Match Generator. It also happens to take place right here in Philly at the Wells Fargo Center, where I actually got to attend the 2018 Royal Rumble, along with NXT TakeOver Philadelphia, which included the 5-star Johnny Gargano vs. Andrade Cien Almas match. That whole weekend was one of the greatest wrestling experiences of my life, and seeing another Rumble in that same arena really took me back. Fast forward to the match, and this was clearly at the peak of John Cena hate. He's booed the entire way to the ring, which JBL tries to cover up on commentary by saying the Philly crowd is unique. He's also heavily booed later when he starts doing the 5 moves of doom. Seth Rollins is accompanied by J&J Security, and of course, Brock Lesnar is joined by his advocate, Paul Heyman. Seth immediately ducks out of the ring, leaving Cena open for a quick German suplex. Rollins sends in the Jays, but they're taken out by Lesnar as well, who then drags in the Architect and lays waste to both him and Cena. They have to work together as a team to get any kind of advantage over Lesnar, but that's difficult because Rollins is such a weasel. Seth tries to hit Brock with a flying knee, but Lesnar catches him out of midair into an F5. Cena breaks up the pin though. Brock clears off the announce table for Seth, but gets coaxed back into the ring by Cena, who hits 3 consecutive AAs before Rollins breaks it up this time. Despite taking a curb stomp on top of that, Lesnar is the first man to his feet, so Cena puts him through a barricade. He follows that up by bashing Lesnar in the head with the steel steps before laying him out on the announcer's desk. Seth takes out Cena and soars off the top rope to put Brock through the table with one of the best elbow drops I've ever seen. While Heyman screams for a doctor, Cena locks in the STF on Rollins, but it's broken up by J&J Security. EMTs rush out with a stretcher for Brock, while Seth and his goons give a Shield-style triple powerbomb to Cena. However, by the time Seth grabs his Money in the Bank briefcase, Cena has recovered and sends him over the top rope before taking out J&J Security with a double AA. Just as Rollins hits a ridiculous flipping corkscrew off the top rope, Lesnar appears out of nowhere and takes everyone to Suplex City. Seth grabs his briefcase again and clocks Lesnar in the face twice, but the Beast reverses a curb stomp into an F5 and retains his WWE Championship. Okay, I can definitely see why people like this match. It was great, but there were a few plot holes that stopped me from truly suspending my disbelief. The biggest was how quickly Brock went from getting medical attention to being at seemingly full strength. Putting that aside though, the action was fast-paced from start to finish. It's clear that Seth was still trying to impress the higher-ups because he went balls to the wall in a way I can't recall seeing in quite some time. In the end, Brock wins LOL, and it sets up Rollins' historic cash-in at WrestleMania 31. Well, that'll do it for this special action figure review. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. I'll be back on Thursday with my review of AEW Dynamite, so check back then. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to do all that normal YouTube stuff. Smash the like button, share with any wrestling or action figure fans you may know, subscribe to the channel, and spread the word. You can also talk to me over on Twitter at PSUOptimus, or check out all my best figure photography over on Instagram at WrestlingOptimus. If you haven't seen my most recent review of Dynamite, you can check that out right here. But until next time, I've been Wrestling Optimus, and I'll catch you later.